Perfect.
1940. 1940.
And we thank you for joining on a Saturday, talking about extreme heat.
It's already hot. Yeah. You see the sweat? You see the sweat beads?
Yeah, it's cooking. It's definitely cooking.
Well, if you're just joining, please introduce yourself into the chat box. Let us know where you're from.
Morning, Miriam.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hello, Lauren. I see you smiling.
All right, we had 96. We almost got 90, almost to 100.
Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Everyone, welcome. We have a special question dropped in the chat. It'll be dropped a couple times over, but check it out.
Yep, we made 100.
Wow. Folks, there is a question in the chat box. Please check it out. We're going to throw it in the chat box a couple of times. Please answer the question in the chat box. Welcome. Welcome. Good morning. Thank you for joining. If you are just joining us, please introduce yourself. There is a question for you all to answer in the chat box. Please check it out and see if you can answer that question for us.
I don't see the question in the chat box. Where is it?
There it is.
What is the question?
The question is, has COVID-19 changed the way you usually deal with summer heat? I'm going to read that one more time. Has COVID-19 changed the way you usually deal with summer heat? So let us know in the chat box.
Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome. How are you?
I'm okay.
Well, it's definitely good to see you this morning.
Hey, Ziggler, what's happening?
Hey, Mr. Charles, how you doing?
Doing all right, my friend.
Big Paul
Okay.
Bailey's back in the house. Michael, good morning. I see you. How you been?
Ira, are you on the Hudson River? Are you about to go swimming?
I'm not swimming right now, but I'm just on the Baylander cleaning oysters.
Yeah, maybe that's me. Yes, I live on the Hudson River.
I have a nice crop of rib mussels on this oyster thing.
Good morning, Miriam. How are you?
Oh, we got people spending time in the shade.
Good, and you?
Park.
Yeah, it's 7-Eleven day, everybody. 7-Eleven. Go to 7-Eleven.
Wow.
Ira grows his own oysters up there on the Hudson at 125th Street. He's going to invite us over for a large oyster fest.
Very nice.
Not this year.
Marquise, on your word, I'm ready when you are.
All right, we're going to kick this meeting off. Welcome, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Just waiting for the PowerPoint. Am I? All right, I'm going to kick us off. For those of you who don't know, my name is Marquise Jenkins. I am the Director of Organizing for WEACT and the Membership Coordinator. Thank you for joining us today for our June 11th membership meeting. This meeting is made possible by a whole army of people who are here joining the meeting today. We have members of the Membership Planning Committee, we have interns, and we have staff all working behind the scenes and in front, making sure that this meeting goes well.
It has changed me.
The information that we have for you today. To kick us off, I just want to run through our agenda really quickly, just so that you have an understanding of what we're going to discuss today. So we already went through the welcome where we said hello to everyone. We have an amazing panel of speakers. I'm not going to give them away. I'm going to kind of keep you guys out there lingering, but we have a really dynamic panel discussion happening. And then we're going to have some small group conversations, right? Let's really dig deep into our personal stories and some of the policies that are out there and policies that we might be able to push to address some of the heat issues that we're dealing with today, especially under the reality of COVID-19. After we come back from the breakout sessions, we'll then have a call to action, and then we will close out the meeting. Next slide. So I also wanted to go over some housekeeping. We have been on Zoom for 3 months now. I think this is our third meeting. Typically, we meet in person. I would ask you, if you have been to our in-person meetings, to please remember those rules that we have for those in-person meetings. We want to make sure that we keep a safe space. In addition, while we're on Zoom, I ask that you please be respectful on camera while you're speaking and while you're making comments in the chat box. As we're going through the meeting, all mics will be put on mute. If we miss your mic, please put your mic on mute. If you are on a computer, there is a small mic icon on the bottom left corner of your Zoom screen. You can click on that mic to mute and unmute your microphone. If you are calling in today from a phone, you can press *6 to mute and unmute your phone. Gallery view versus speaker view. We were very intentional about making sure that this meeting setting was done on Zoom in the setting that it is, as opposed to being done in a webinar. We wanted to make sure that we can get as close to our in-person meetings as possible. So I encourage you to go back and forth from gallery view to see all the people who are participating in this meeting. As I mentioned earlier, we do have an amazing panel of speakers. So when we have those speakers on, I encourage you to switch back to speaker view. If you are on a computer, on the top right side corner of your Zoom screen, there is an icon that says speaker view or gallery view. You can click on that button to go back and forth from gallery view to speaker view. If you are on a smartphone or a tablet, you can simply swipe left or swipe right to go from gallery view to speaker view. So after we have our panel conversation, there will be an opportunity to ask questions during the meeting. If you want to ask questions, click next, please. If you have questions or comments, we ask that you please share them in the chat box first. We don't have much time, and unfortunately we won't get to everyone, but we certainly will try to get to as many questions in the chat box as possible. So please, any questions that you have, put it in the chat box. You can also put any resources that you know of, any links, any helpful links as well. So please make sure that you utilize the chat box. In addition to that, we will select a few people to ask a question to the panelists. So if you want to ask a question, you can simply raise your hand. The way you raise your hand is at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there is an icon that says participants. If you click on that icon, it would open up a participants box. At the bottom left side of that participants box, you will see a blue hand. Under that blue hand, you will see the words raise hand. Someone will call on you to ask your question, and your mic will be unmuted. We're also going to be taking some polls. Polls are a good way for us to hear from all of you, or as much of you as possible. It is also a way for us to learn more about each other. And then finally, it's a way for us to focus on the environmental justice issues that matter most to you, our members. As I mentioned when I discussed the agenda, we will be going into smaller groups called breakout sessions. Now, I don't want you to get scared because your screen is going to change. When we initiate the breakout session, you are going to see this screen. If you are on a computer, if you are on a phone, I would ask you to please be patient that we are transitioning you into another room. It's important to know that you do not have to do anything. Our team will move you to the breakout room automatically. After the breakout session, you will see this icon, which will let you know that we are returning back to the main Zoom room. It may take your computer a few seconds, but please don't panic. Just hang tight and it will bring you to the main meeting. The same is true for those of you who are calling in. Now, let's get into the meat. Today we're going to be talking about extreme heat. So what do we mean? How are we defining extreme heat? And what are some of those conditions, again, right, that we classify under extreme heat? So first and foremost, when the temperature and the humidity combined is higher than normal, when you have that sense of uncomfortable feeling, it might be harder for you to go about your everyday life. You might be used to running 3, 4, 5 errands, some of you even more. And now it's difficult to be running those errands that you're used to running. So your everyday lifestyle has changed. And in New York City, extreme heat is a big issue during the summertime, obviously. As we are getting more severe weather challenges, of course, that means we're seeing more heat. And that's also, I also want to say that heat, right, is one of the more deadlier forms of severe weather. So now I'm going to kick it off to my coworker, Sonal, to take us into the next part of our agenda. Thank you all for participating. And Sonal, please take it away.
Great, thank you, Marquise. Thanks everyone for joining. We're excited to have you all. Emily, if you want to open the poll, and we'll leave that open for a little, maybe about a minute while I transition our slides.
Sonal, how's it going?
Going well, thank you. Okay, we're about to begin. So thank you, Emily. You can close our poll and share our results with folks. It seems like everyone has a lot of knowledge about extreme heat, which is great, and it's definitely a really important issue that we'll get into today. And I'm lucky enough to get to introduce our wonderful panel. We have a panel of 4 speakers that are here with us today that are experts in extreme heat in many different ways. So I will go ahead and introduce them, and then we will give the room over to them for them to begin. So let me just share my screen once more. Great. So first I want to introduce Carrie Olson. She's Assistant Commissioner of the Bureau of Environmental Surveillance and Policy at the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. This bureau's multidisciplinary team of researchers, data scientists, and lawyers works to influence environmental health policies and programs through innovative health surveillance, legislative, and regulatory action, and informatics across topics ranging from air quality and climate change to child care and restaurant regulation. Carrie and her team have been leading multifaceted efforts to combat the health impacts of extreme heat via healthcare system investment, community resiliency, and equitable access to air conditioning. Building on 15 years as a department, Carrie has focused her expertise on the effective use of health data to inform public health practice through collaboration with academic, community, and government partners. She received an MPH from Columbia University Mailman School of Public Health and a BS in journalism from Northwestern University. So welcome, Carrie. Thanks for coming. And next, I would like to introduce Judy Sheridan Gonzalez. Judy is the president of a 40,000-member New York State Nurses Association, New York's largest nurses union. She's worked more than 30 years as an emergency room RN in Montefiore Hospital in the Bronx, as well as in a variety of other specialties in assorted healthcare environments. She is part of an active group of nurses engaged in transforming the organization into a social justice union, pledged to participate in uniting labor and community in order to construct a movement dedicated to combat inequality and committed to social change. So thank you, Judy, for joining us. Next, we have Janie K. Bavishi. Janie serves as a director of New York City Mayor's Office of Resiliency, where she tackles the challenge of climate change through science-based analysis, policy, program development, and capacity building. She previously served as the Associate Director for Climate Preparedness at the White House Council on Environmental Quality under President Barack Obama. Bavishi has a master's degree in city planning from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and a bachelor's degree in public policy and cultural anthropology from Duke University. So welcome, Janie. Last but very certainly not least, we have Tanya Jones. Tanya has worked at HeartShare Human Services for over 20 years and is the Director of Energy Assistance and Community Development. Her position entails developing low-income assistance programs for utilities and other entities, while currently managing multiple grant programs which serve New York State's low-income population throughout the year. She also works closely with New York State elected officials' offices, community-based organizations, major utilities, New York State Public Service Commission, nuclear companies, and the general public. Her efforts also include being strongly active in community outreach, implementing new community initiatives, presenting on low-income issues and programs, energy efficiency and policies on state and national level, and is a strong advocate of low-income, elderly, and disability issues. In addition, Tanya serves on the board of several advisory committees for New York State and the National Board on Energy and Utility Affordability. She is also a national conference planner and a private event planner. So thank you very much for coming, Tanya.
Introducing all these people. I don't want to know their credentials and who they are.
Oh, so let's make sure we mute everyone's microphones. Thank you. So we'll bring up our first speaker. Each one of our panelists are going to present about 3 minutes about extreme heat for you all. And the first we'll have is Carrie. Take it away.
Great. Good morning, everyone. And thank you so much to Sonal and the WEAC team for having me here today to talk about what is an incredibly important topic to me and to us at the health department. And it's a very appropriate day because it's very hot. I think we're going to be nearing heat advisory heat levels in the city this weekend. So I'm honored to start us off with a very quick discussion of and context about why at the health department we care about heat and how it relates to public health. So hot weather is more than just uncomfortable, it actually can be deadly. And in New York City, every year on average, we see about 13 people who die from heat stroke each year, and another 115 who die from a pre-existing health condition that was worsened by the heat. We also have more than 600 ED and hospitalizations related to hot weather each year, and all of that is without an ongoing pandemic with keeping people at home. So the health department conducts research and surveillance on heat-related illness and death. And what we know is that most heat stroke deaths happen after exposure to heat inside a home without a functioning air conditioner. In addition to not having AC at home to keep you cool, those who are most vulnerable have one or more risk factors, which include older age, people with chronic health conditions such as renal disease, respiratory disease, obesity, people with serious mental illness, people who use drugs or alcohol, and people who take certain medications that may make it difficult for them to, their bodies to regulate their temperature. So we know also that the same populations that are at risk of severe COVID-19 complications are also at risk of heat-related illness if they don't have an air conditioner at home. And this is the reason that this summer in particular, even more than others, we're focused on in-home cooling assistance. Access to air conditioning and the health impacts that come from not having access is an issue of health equity. We know that the risk of death during a heat wave is higher among non-Latinx Black New Yorkers, and it's most common in our poorest communities. And these inequities in heat-related death mirror those that we've been seeing in COVID-19 severe outcomes and so many other health outcomes. And they stem from the racist systems and policies that have impacted opportunities and resources in our communities. This has a direct impact on many household decisions, including the ability to afford and use air conditioning. And I want to make clear that not only are there many who don't have air conditioning, but there are also many who are suffering from energy insecurity and don't have the dollars to turn that on. We know that 12% of adults who are 65 years and older report not having an air conditioner citywide, and it's 22% of adults, older adults in East Harlem. So there are huge disparities in our city on this. And this summer, COVID-19 is keeping us all at home way more than usual, particularly people who are at greatest risk. And that's why checking on our neighbors, our friends, and family before, during, and after summer heat waves is such an important measure to be doing right now. I want to mention quickly that you can get lots of information on health and heat, as well as tips to stay safe yourself and also help the people that you care about at nyc.gov/health/heat. And I'll stick that into the chat. And I'm really happy and look forward to answering questions, but I'm going to pass the mic now to my colleagues to talk more about climate change and the work that we're doing to make our city a resilient and sustainable one. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Carrie, so much. And quickly before I pass it off to Judy, who will be our next speaker, I forgot to mention that I know Marquis said would mention the raise hand function for asking a question, but for this panel today, we're actually asking you to drop your questions in the chat so that we can compile them all. So if you have a question, please put it in the chat box, and we have someone that's going to kind of bring them all, put them all together, and then we'll try to ask as many as we can to our panelists. Thank you. So next we'll bring up Judy.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. So as we know, our planet's getting hotter, And the overwhelming climate change that results from it has serious consequences to our ecosystem and, of course, the living organisms like us who live here. And we're impacted in this in very direct and indirect ways. Next slide. The program today speaks to one aspect, extreme heat, and it offers palliative solutions to this situation. But significantly, extreme heat can be mitigated with a variety of treatments, all of whom are accessible to folks with wealth and access to second home, central air, the ability to stay home, travel, and obtain other forms of relief. Next slide. But it's the poor and the working class, people of color, who always suffer the most and have the least access to such sources of relief. In the same way, the climate change that we see in our world today is promulgated by what we refer to as the global north and its indiscriminate use of fossil fuels. The deadly impact of these destructive practices is felt most of all by the global south, the vast majority of whom are people of color, indigenous peoples, and the poor, the marginalized, the colonized, and the oppressed. Next slide. But even in the north, next slide. Next slide. Even in the north, in the United States, and in New York City, where we live, the impact of this warming disproportionately affects a similar population, even one that lives in the industrialized world. And the impact occurs in all seasons, not just the summer. It's responsible for superstorms, for drought, for wildfires, for air pollution, and even for coastal blizzards. Next slide. So it's important to talk about the science very briefly. We've all heard of the greenhouse effect, suns radiated to the earth and re-radiated back to the atmosphere and into space. However, man-made enhanced greenhouse effect, if you look at the slide on the right, that burning of fossil fuels such as oil, coal, and gas release dangerous gases, carbon dioxide, methane, nitrogen, even water vapor. And that prevents, you see that red, that prevents the heat from escaping, and that's what warms up the planet. Next slide. That warming causes glaciers, Arctic sea ice to melt. It changes the nature of the sea, the rising sea levels, and concentrating increased moisture into the air. And if you look at this slide, in 30 years, something that should take place over 200, 300 years, many centuries, half the Arctic sea ice melted. Next slide. And that's the cause of these superstorms, such as Maria in Puerto Rico in 2017, Hurricane Sandy in New York in 2012, and even the storms of the last few days results in storm surge, flooding, and a lot of injuries and illnesses that result. Next slide. The diesel fuels, incinerators, and dumps with toxic gases concentrated in poor communities and communities of color permeate the air, stagnate as a result of increased heat, causing serious respiratory problems such as asthma and emphysema. And the map clearly shows where the problems are: the South Bronx, Harlem, East Harlem. They're the capitals of the nation. Next slide. Even more concerning, the resulting climate change from the change in temperatures create a perfect home for vectors, transmitters of disease, not just mosquitoes that carry viruses and bacteria such as Zika, chikungunya, and Ebola. Next slide. But as we see today, the new and more dangerous microorganisms such as COVID-19, which is the newest version of the coronavirus. Next slide. And the global pandemic that dominates our lives today. Next slide. The very direct health effects of heat, such as we see in New York City, particularly areas without foliage, concrete tall buildings, are heat exhaustion, as you heard, heat stroke, with symptoms that cause other problems such as rapid heart rates, confusion, exhaustion, weakness, and fainting. And these slides that we can make available to you, don't have to read them all. Cardiac complications, even heart attacks. Next. Lung problems due to the stagnant air and the changes in air pressure, forcing those with pre-existing conditions to have a much harder time breathing, even people with no prior issues. Next. Increases blood pressure due to the heat stress and mental stress. And mental stress and depression are a direct result of heat-related issues. And next slide. And these results can be deadly with metabolic changes and strokes. Next slide. All of these problems overwhelm our already crowded and understaffed emergency rooms, such as the one in which I work in the Bronx, forcing long waits, the inability of staff to properly care for patients. And with COVID, this is much worse. And as the summer progresses, if we get a surge, it's going to be a living hell. Next slide. So this is the point. Climate change is making us sick. Next slide. This is an excellent slide from the Centers for Disease Control that illustrates it clearly. You can download it, or perhaps WEAC can copy it and make it available for you to study. It goes from the extreme heat, what it does to the environment, and how it affects your health. This is all factual. Next slide. So there isn't any time left to stop the burning of our planet. We have to take action. Next slide. And as the largest nurses union in New York, we now have 43,000 members. We in NICE are involved, as is WEAC, in fighting these fossil fuel corporations and their political supporters to move towards sustainable, publicly owned, and controlled energy to save our planet, our lives, final slide, and our future. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you very much, Judy, for that presentation of how heat is related to global warming and climate change. I stopped screen sharing just so we have more space to see each other now that we're not going to be using the presentations for a bit. And I want to welcome our next speaker, Jamie.
Thank you, Sonal, and thank you so much for having me, and thank you all for joining us for this important conversation on a Saturday morning. I just wanted to talk a little bit about what the city is doing to address extreme heat and the long-term impacts of extreme heat that Judy talked about, and then also what we're doing for this summer, given that it's an unprecedented season. So let me just start by saying that protecting New Yorkers from heat is a multi-agency effort. The Mayor's Office of Resiliency, which is the office that I lead, leads the city's long-term planning for climate change adaptation. New York City Emergency Management is responsible for emergency planning and immediate response when heat waves strike. And we work also with the Health Department, and especially Carrie, the Parks Department, the Department of Environmental Protection, the Department of Transportation, the Department of Small Business Services, and multiple other agencies. So this is really a multi-agency, multi-stakeholder effort within the city government. And there's no question that the challenges we face this summer are unprecedented. However, we already have a strong foundation for heat mitigation and heat resiliency due to the Cool Neighborhoods NYC strategy, which we released in 2017. And it's really an innovative strategy and a citywide strategy that's focused on tackling extreme heat and its cascading impacts. The strategy invested $106 million and laid out a comprehensive approach that will make neighborhoods cooler through significant tree plantings in city streets and parks, and painting reflective coatings on millions of square feet of rooftops in our most heat vulnerable neighborhoods. And then the strategy also laid out some ways that we can protect the most vulnerable New Yorkers inside their homes by providing heat risk education and increasing social support networks through our Be a Buddy pilot program, which WEAC has been an important partner in. And we've also enlisted home care agencies and community health organizations as partners in building community resiliency. So the strategy was designed with equity at its core. The city's heat vulnerability index, it doesn't only look at physical vulnerability, it also considers social vulnerability, including factors like poverty and race. And our investments are targeted at the areas that are identified by the HVI as facing the highest risks. But we know that COVID-19 and climate change are on a collision course this summer. We began planning for this heat season early on in the pandemic, knowing that this was going to be a very, very unique heat season. And the three pillars of our summer heat plan are more strategies to keep the most vulnerable cool and healthy without leaving their homes, utility assistance so that those who have air conditioners can afford to run them, and then adapted strategies to provide new cooling options outdoors and to make sure that cooling centers are safe. So the centerpiece of our summer heat plan is the Get Cool NYC program, which is providing over 74,000 air conditioners to vulnerable New Yorkers. And specifically, we are focusing on New Yorkers who are 60 years old or older and have income below 60% of the state median income and do not have air conditioning at home. So this program doesn't have an application component. Eligible New Yorkers are identified by NYCHA, by the Department for the Aging, by Human Resources Administration and the Department of Housing Preservation and Development, and city case managers are reaching out to them directly. It's an incredibly ambitious program. We've installed approximately 35,000 air conditioners so far, and we continue to reach hundreds of more New Yorkers every day. The second component of our summer heat program is utility assistance. So the city successfully petitioned the Public Service Commission to provide utility subsidies to 440,000 New York City low-income families. And they will receive about $140 from June to October for a total of about $70 million in aid. And this is incredibly important because, as I said before, it doesn't matter if you have an air conditioner if you can't afford to turn it on. So just wanted to make sure that, especially in the context of the economic crisis that we're facing now, that finances were not a barrier to keeping people cool inside their homes. But we also identified alternate cooling options for the summer. So New York City Emergency Management has identified alternate cooling centers from previous years that can be adapted to accommodate social distancing measures. And these are being operated under guidelines that have been developed in partnership with the Department of Health. And then we're also providing outdoor cooling options, combining our Cool Streets program with Open Street program, where parks, DEP, DOT will provide spray caps, spray showers, and will schedule hydrant openings to ensure access to outdoor cooling across the city. DEP has also created a reusable water bottle distribution program that began earlier this summer to promote reusable bottles and remind New Yorkers to stay hydrated. So why don't I stop there? I wanted to provide a quick overview of the work that we're doing this summer, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Janie, and thanks for highlighting all the work your office is doing with the city. And lastly, I would like to bring up Tanya.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me this morning. COVID-19 has definitely taken us all by storm, leaving us with a new way of life, or even somewhat a pause on life. I'm just going to give you a couple of national numbers. More than 40 million Americans have filed for unemployment during this COVID period. More than one-fourth of those, who have lost their jobs during this crisis have reported either skipping a bill payment or needing to skip a utility bill payment due to either food insecurity or fear of eviction. So those are really big things. Arrearages are piling up due to the moratoriums. People are just not able to pay, and they're not getting disconnected. So they're not really worried about it. They're worried about paying their other bills. Mainly, again, like I said, buying food for their families. All the children are home. Everyone has to worry about, feeding their kids nonstop. I personally have 2 kids. They eat every single hour of every single day. It's rough. So the projections with the surge in unemployment combined with the suspension of disconnections, the balances of unpaid bills are expected to reach $2.6 billion through 2022, which is astronomical. 9 out of 10 households have a person who is vulnerable to temperature extremes because of either age, disability, or some sort of health issue. These are the same people most vulnerable to serious complications from COVID. 1 out of 3 households are also reporting that they have gone without food in the past year. 1 out of 4 households can't afford cooling units, and this will stretch into the winter when it comes to the pandemic because they are projecting those numbers into the winter. They don't see employment, gaining. They see more layoffs. At HeartShare, what we are seeing is people calling us saying, I don't want to turn on my air conditioner because I'm afraid that the air from outside is going to circulate inside and I'm going to get COVID. So there's a real fear there. They're also saying, I don't want to turn on my air conditioner because how am I going to pay this bill? Even though I'm not getting shut off now, I'm going to get shut off later. I can't afford to pay. We are urging people, if they have a unit, please turn it on. Utility companies are really, really lenient right now on giving payment agreements. We have kept all of our assistance programs open, so we are giving money to help with utilities right now. HEAP is open. HEAP is going to be open until August 31st. Everyone should be applying. There is a regular grant. There were 3 emergency grants. Please get your grants. There's also a fear of getting help. There's also a huge impact on people who are newly unemployed and the embarrassment of getting grants because they've never had to apply for anything. So now they're embarrassed. Like, I've never had to have this before. I don't know what to do. I don't want to get help. That's not me. We see a lot of that's not me. what we are doing is putting our information out there so that people can contact us directly if they need help. We can help them navigate through heat applications. We can help them navigate through payment agreements with utilities. Anything we can do just to help people through this time, because asthma patients, when they're running nebulizers, Con Ed doesn't really consider that life-sustaining equipment. However, we know if there's no electricity, you will not be breathing because you can't afford to run that nebulizer. Sometimes a pump is not enough. If you have an oxygen tank and your bill is astronomical and then the moratorium is over, you won't be able to run that oxygen tank. So it's a lot of information that's out there that people are just not getting, that we're just trying to make sure we distribute. There's a lot of reassurance that we're trying to do. There's a lot of just please go get your benefits. It's a really big push. So if I will put our information in the chat box, the direct link to the energy department, if you know of people or if you yourself just need someone who can, get their benefits or having problems getting their benefits or embarrassed of getting their benefits, if you know a neighbor who's just sitting there in the heat because they're afraid, please contact me. I will do the best I can to make sure they get everything they can, because this is a real extreme time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tanya, for that important information and connecting people to resources. Everyone, the HEAP app, there's a link for the application of the Home Energy Assistance Program in the chat box now. We'll also be sending all of these resources after the meeting as well. Before we begin some of our audience questions and our moderated questions, I want to bring up our member Gwen to ask her question. Gwen, take it away.
Thank you, Sono. Good morning, everyone. My question is to the panelists. What plan?
Gwen, are you still there? You've cut out.
Yeah, it looks like she froze.
Seniors, as well as the home agency.
There she goes. All right.
Gwen, can you ask your question once more? You cut out a bit.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
What plans, this is the panelists, what plans are in place to help our seniors as well as the homeless population who may be living on the streets get to cooling centers, especially in the event of an emergency?
Thank you, Gwen, and that's a question for any panelist. Thanks.
This is Carrie. I can start, but Janie, please jump in as well. So as Janie had mentioned, this summer during a heat event, the city will be activating the heat plan, which has been modified specifically to address the issues around COVID-19. There will be cooling centers available and promoted during a heat event, and those the Department of Emergency Management has worked very closely with all of the other partners, including the health department, to make sure that those are safe spaces where people can go to get relief from the heat. So I think that for those who do not have air conditioning, there will be options like that, as well as the cool streets and other outdoor options for people who are looking to just get some relief from the heat outside. So I think that's a start to the question, but if there's additional thoughts that the other panelists have, please.
No, I think that's right, Carrie. And the only thing I would add is that we have been targeting cooling centers and the outdoor cooling options in the most heat vulnerable areas across the city. So that's been kind of a lens that we've been using to ensure that options are available and without going a far distance.
Thank you both, and thanks, Gwen, for your question. We're running a little bit short on time, so we're going to kind of skip some of the pre-created questions that we had and center the audience's questions, if that's all right. So one of the first questions I want to ask is from the audience is one person was asking about the demographic breakdown of people who have deaths attributed to heat or maybe are hospitalized. So I'm wondering, is there kind of a racial inequality there? And also, how have we kind of seen racial inequalities play out in the summertime generally with health issues related to heat?
Sure. So I can start that, and then others please jump in as well. It's a great question and incredibly important, and actually has been a huge driver of a lot of our work at the health department. There are significant disparities, inequities in health, heat-related health outcomes. And those data are available online, and I encourage you to go check them out. I'll put, again, a link into the chat. But we do know that non-Hispanic Black New Yorkers have much higher risk of death due to heat in the summer compared to other New Yorkers. And when we look at a community level, Janie already mentioned the Heat Vulnerability Index, and this is an index that was put together by the health department with colleagues at Columbia that outlines the risk of extreme outcomes from heat based on social and environmental factors, and that includes poverty and race, as well as the actual temperature, which varies across the city, city by neighborhood, and greenery, so having a green neighborhood. And all of those things mean that we see much higher and more extreme risk for heat-related illness in certain neighborhoods in our city. And so, for example, East and Central Harlem, the index goes from 1 to 5, with 5 being the greatest risk, and East and Central Harlem are 4 and 5 neighborhoods. So there are inequities, and that's exactly what has driven a huge amount of the work that the city has done in order to address those and try to get support to the neighborhoods that are most in need.
I don't really have anything to add except to just say that, you know, heat vulnerability is a climate justice issue, and we recognize that. And that's why we have been taking social vulnerability into account to understand who's at risk, not just which areas are at risk, and making sure that the investments we're making and the solutions that we're advancing benefit those people, because we don't just want to know who's disproportionately impacted, but we want to make sure that the environmental benefits of the solutions that we're putting forward are also reaching those people who are the most impacted.
Thank you.
I would just add that when we were doing our research on COVID, there wasn't one statistical issue that didn't disproportionately affect people of color and Black people, not only in the city, but around the nation, not one, except for European-linked genetic abnormalities. That was the only area that wasn't disproportionately affecting people of color. So heat is definitely another factor. All what we call the social determinants of health disproportionately affect people who are poor and people of color. And this is part of the whole institutional racism that everybody's mobilizing around. It's violence as well. It's a killer.
Thanks, Judy, for adding that very important point. So the next question that we have is, we have a couple people asking, what are the signs of heat stroke? And I'll add to that, when should people know what is the point to seek healthcare for a heat-related illness?
So maybe I can start with that. So there's heat stroke and there's heat exhaustion, but some of the signs are, feeling hot, but something for a lot of seniors that you might not realize, because they tend not to complain, and their sensitivity to these mechanisms is not as strong as those with younger people, and you'll find confusion. That's a very, very early sign. People become a little bit out of it, a little bit confused, a little bit dazed. That might be the first thing you see in an older person, because their sensitivity to all kinds of other symptoms, even another thing, it's not heat related, but it's important, One of the chief causes of death of elderly is sepsis, from urinary sepsis. They don't have symptoms of a urinary infection. They get confused. They may not have a fever. They get confused. Confusion in an elderly person is a critical issue that could lead to a lot of problems, but particularly with heat exhaustion and heat stroke. You might have tremors. You might start seeing kind of spots in front of your eyes, certainly weakness and dizziness, feeling very, very tired, nausea. Sometimes you'll get some gastric upset. You might vomit. You might feel like you have to go to the bathroom, an urge, or you have diarrhea. Your skin gets moist. You lose some color. And of course, heat stroke, your fever goes up very high, sometimes to a point where we can't lower it, even in the emergency room. And also your heart rate will speed up. You might want to check somebody's pulse. It shouldn't be higher than 80 or 90. If it goes over 100, that's another sign. Loss of appetite. When the skin goes from very moist and pale to very dry, that's a worse sign. That means that it's getting worse. We want to catch it early, and I assure you, confusion and being dazed is a very early sign that you should pay attention to. I'm sure my colleagues have stuff to add.
Great. I think it sounds like you covered it. Thank you, Judy.
Right. I was going to say, I definitely have seen seniors not complain, and that's one of the biggest things, that they will suffer all these issues and just say, oh, my heart is acting up, or, I just have a headache, when really they're going through all these things and they don't want to say anything. And that's one of the biggest issues. They just don't say anything. And so you don't know. I really urge, the community, especially, pay attention to the seniors, because they will be the first ones to, I hate to say it, the first ones to fall, because they're silent.
Thank you, Tanya. That's a very important point. So we're running a little bit short on time, so we're just going to ask 2 more questions. But what we'll try to do is get some of these questions answered after the fact and send them around to everyone. I don't want your questions to feel lost. But I'm going to try to ask some questions that put some of these in one. First of all, we have a couple people asking about power outages. So for the panelists, are there, educational programs done to inform the public about using the AC appropriately, and are there considerations being taken for potential power outages?
I'm happy to start, and then my colleagues can add. So yes, we try to let people know that setting your air conditioner to 78 degrees is a way to keep cool and keep safe, but doesn't drive up your energy bill and doesn't put undue stress on the electrical grid. So we definitely work to get that message out. And absolutely, after last year's power outages, we've increased coordination with our utility providers, including monthly workshops and updates to our communication procedures. And then, given the context of the pandemic, we've actually doubled down on our engagement with utility providers. So both my team and the team at Emergency Management are on multiple weekly calls with the utilities, just to make sure we're monitoring and ensuring that there are no concerns or disruptions that we have to plan for, and that we can plan in advance and take action in advance in case there are any issues.
Just to add to that, if there is a blackout or a real power outage in your building, and you live in a tall building, you'll most likely lose water pressure. So we also recommend, particularly in the summer, for people to store water in gallon containers. Buy a bottle of distilled water and don't throw it out. Put some water in there. Get a Brita. They're not that expensive to have one on hand should you need the drinking water. And keep a couple of bottles of Gatorade handy. One of the reasons that people get very sick from heat is not just drinking water, but drinking water with electrolytes in it, so you don't throw off your metabolic system. So having Gatorade, or even making a concoction with a little bit of cranberry juice or apple juice and water in it. Drinking when you have a power outage, if you can afford a fan with battery run fan, we use those a lot in Puerto Rico when we had no power for months. That's also something that you can use. But drinking fluids is very helpful if you have no electricity at all, if there is a power outage. But we find the biggest problem is people don't store water. And drinking water is a very good solution to avoiding having heat stroke or heat exhaustion.
I would also just add to all of those great points that the utility companies also have particular programs where you can register if you need any sort of equipment for your health related to electricity, so that you, if they are seeing that there's any issues with power or a power outage happens, then you'll get services much more quickly. So we've done some campaigns to try to make sure that people are aware of these programs and that they register with the utility companies. But if you have any questions about that, you can call them directly, or you can reach out to the health department. We have information on our website as well. I think that's very important for people who may be dependent upon some type of electrical equipment for their health.
Great, thank you. And so I'll ask one more question and then one more quick informational question after that. We have a lot of people asking about NYCHA, so I just want to make it a little bit more broad so we can get a lot of these questions in there. What is the city thinking about, particularly when it comes to NYCHA and folks living in NYCHA for heat this summer?
NYCHA residents are absolutely eligible for the Get Cool NYC program. As I said, if they're above 60 years old or are reliant on medical equipment that limits their mobility. And so we are also reaching out to, NYCHA is reaching out to NYCHA residents to install air conditioners for residents who don't already have them and meet that criteria.
I would also add that for the first time this year, the city petitioned the state office that administers the Home Energy Assistance Program, and that office has expanded the criteria so that individuals who are living in public housing or receive other housing subsidies can apply for the cooling assistance program. So that, I think that's something that was not available previously. And the Get Cool program is great, but if there are people who don't meet those criteria but have medical issues, they can also apply for HEAP.
Yeah, and we'll also add to that I believe they waive the requirement that you have to have medical documentation for this year as well. So please, everyone, the link is in the chat again for applying for HEAP. And then, so the last quick question before we thank our panelists is we have a lot of people asking about the cooling center map. Is that map yet open? Are the locations of the cooling centers publicized yet?
So the cooling center map will be open when there is a heat activation. So the city activates cooling centers for a forecast high of 95 degrees or a forecast heat index of 100 degrees. And these are thresholds that are guided by the health department and help to set by the health department. So we have cooling centers in all 5 boroughs, and when we are activating our cooling centers, you will see the cooling center finder up and running. It's at nyc.gov/beat the heat, or you can call 311. And not all cooling centers are open at the same time. Some are sometimes down for maintenance. This summer, some of our facilities that are usually used as cooling centers are not running. So it's really important that you check which cooling centers are open before you go out to a cooling center. And sometimes they change day to day. So please check every day, either by calling 311 or going to nyc.gov/beat the heat.
Great, thank you, Jamie. So everyone, keep an eye out for that map when there's a heat emergency called. So I want to thank our panelists. I know we didn't have enough time to answer all the questions. I appreciate our audience asking so many questions and being so engaged, which is wonderful. We'll work to get as many of these answered as we can after the meeting and send them around. But I want to thank our panelists so much for coming today and giving us all of this amazing information. So thank you.
Thanks so
Everyone
much.
can give like a round of applause on their Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. And so we are going to be moving into our breakout room sessions. Before we do that, we want to announce the HEAT initiative that WEACT is working on. So while we bring up Jewel to make that announcement, Emily, would you like to open the poll question to end out our panel?
Am I speaking now? Am I speaking?
One moment, Jewel. We'll wait for this panel to go for about 10 seconds more so people can answer this question, and then we'll get started. All right, we'll close our poll and hand it over to Jewel. Thanks, everyone.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
All right. The Heat, Health, and Equity Initiative. We Act for Environmental Justice seeks to address extreme heat vulnerability in Northern Manhattan in what we are calling the Heat, Health, and Equity Initiative. The Heat, Health, and Equity Initiative will be a 3-year-long program to change policies and programs that will help Northern Manhattan residents cope with extreme heat. We are targeting 2 policy items. Program, or LHEAP, LIHEAP, and New York City's Cooling Center program, which both have shortcomings with addressing issues around extreme heat. First, the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program is a state-funded program that is in the cooling months, gives eligible applicants an AC or fan. Many other states, however, use this funding to subsidize utility bills and even to retrofit housing to have better cooling technologies than a single AC unit. Second, the Cooling Center program is a city-run program that opens public spaces for people to go to cool down, like the public libraries. The program seems to have shortfalls and not as many people use it as we would like. WEACT is currently in the planning stage for the Heat, Health, and Equity Initiative. Since last fall, we have been working with community members and representatives from agencies and organizations to plan how over the next 3 years, we will change these 2 policies to make them better. In the fall and winter of 2019, we engaged in building community awareness of extreme heat by holding 4 visioning sessions in all uptown neighborhoods. The sessions gave us the core of our recommendations for solutions to extreme heat in our uptown neighborhoods. Many of you attended these meetings. Now we will convene a strategy committee with institutional and organizational partners to take those recommendations and develop the proposals that will address the gaps in both the low-income home energy assistance and cooling center functioning. In 2021, we will launch our initiative and engage in ongoing evaluation and advocacy around addressing extreme heat in Northern Manhattan through policy, and we hope you all will join us in the work. Thank you.
Thank you, Jewel, for introducing our initiative, and this is kind of where we're bundling all of this work about heat. So if anyone, thought this panel was really interesting, is really, has a lot of ideas and wants to bring up a lot of issues around extreme heat, this is, the initiative under which you can join us and work with us. So thank you, Jewel. And now we're just going to introduce our breakout group sessions. So what we're going to do today is have about 40 minutes for the session, and this is almost the last activity we're going to do at the meeting today. So everyone's going to be able to discuss both of these topics that are up here on the screen. For the first 20 minutes, you will be put into a group of about 25 or so people with a facilitator, and you will talk about either hearing all the different policy proposals and ideas we have around addressing extreme heat as an issue, and we want to get your feedback, see what you think, see if there's really major things missing. And the other group will do some storytelling work where we really want to hear what's going on with you all when it comes to extreme heat. What are you experiencing? What issues are coming up for you? Or how are you, how are you combating it in your daily life? So those are kind of the two groups we're going to be having for this breakout session. Everyone will be able to get to do both topics and discuss both topics. So in about 1 minute, when we put you in your breakout groups, what's going to happen is that the screen will kind of close. You don't have to do anything, just kind of sit back and let it happen. It'll look like your Zoom screen has closed, but then it'll open again and you'll be in a Zoom that has about 20, 25 or so people in it, and we'll have a facilitator. So there you'll talk about either this policy idea or the storytelling for about 20 minutes or so. After 20 minutes, your facilitators will change. So the facilitators will leave the room that they're in, and you'll get new facilitators in the room. You, again, don't have to do anything, just sit back and kind of wait for it to happen. And then you'll talk about the other topic that you were previously not talking about. So that way everyone's going to be able to see the policy ideas that we have, give your input, tell us what you think, and also be able to tell your stories about extreme heat. And then after that, after those 40 minutes or so, we're all going to come back together and discuss some calls to action, some exciting news we have, and close out the meeting. So with that, I think, unless I missed anything, we will jump into our breakout rooms. So Tamim, take it away.
Wow. That's, I don't know if for everyone else, but I certainly enjoyed those conversations. Would you go ahead and just kind of put your thumbs up if you agree with me? How were those conversations? All right. And we had a good chunk of you stay. We still have a good chunk of people who participate in. I'm just gonna wait and make sure everyone comes in and joins us. And while we wait for folks, I'm gonna maybe call on one, maybe two people just to kind of share in 30 seconds exactly what was talked about, or maybe something that stood out in your conversations that you think is worth sharing to the group. So I'm gonna randomly choose someone, but I need you guys to let me know that you wanna speak by raising the blue hand. So if you are someone who wanna share what was discussed in your group, please raise your hand. All right, there's 5 pages, I gotta remember that. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and call on the first person, Jeffrey.
Hey, good morning. It's still morning time, right?
Yeah.
Good morning. So I just want to say it was my first time participating in one of the meetings like this. I want to say it was very informative because there were not only people from different areas of the city, but a good cross section of demographics, and people that didn't necessarily grow up in New York City, but are living here now. So it's always refreshing to hear, as a lifelong New Yorker, it's always refreshing to hear different opinions and what other people are dealing with. So I thought that was great.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I love hearing stories like that. So thanks again, personally. Let's see, do we have any more hands? I think I got time for one more hand. I do see one hand floating up there, and I am gonna call on Tony. Tony,
Hi. Yeah, okay, I unmuted myself. So the last breakout group, time was limited, but we got to discuss how we deal with the heat, personally, how we deal with the heat. Eating a lot of fruits and vegetables, working out, using fans, drinking a lot of water, that kind of stuff. And the first breakout group was regarding how do we get information about the LIHEAP, subsidies that are out there to help people, the free air conditioning. And we decided that one of the most important things was education. and getting that education now where people congregate mainly, which is through food pantries and religious houses of worship, and getting people out there to educate people and let them know that there are ways that they can get a lot of help to deal with heat and what's available out there for them. You know, cooling centers as well. How can we get people hit to cooling centers, because not that many people, they're out there and not that many people are utilizing them. There should be a lot more people utilizing cooling centers. So we talked about getting that education out there as well, informing individuals on where these centers are located at and that they are available. You know, through setups in NYCHA, setups in libraries, setups of information in houses of worship and stuff like that. And I kept saying that if there's a shortage of money to get this done, then tax Wall Street, tax the trades that are going on in Wall Street. They're getting away with murder. They need to start paying some money into the system.
Can we get a round of applause for that one?
Mm.
Wow, so there's so much that was discussed, and we want to continue to build on that momentum, right? So we had a good conversation, but guess what? There was a call to action. We got work to do. And so to help walk us through what that call of action is, I'm going to call on my good friend Anthony to walk us through this.
Thank you, Marquise. So yeah, just a little bit of, as we close the meeting, just some things to go over. WEAC is conducting a survey. It's a extreme heat survey. And what this is intended to do is it's targeted toward people living in Northern Manhattan to see how you're coping with the extreme heat. It's also information that WEAC will be using to make improvements around policies related to extreme heat. A couple things to know: it's completely voluntary. It's also anonymous. All the information is confidential. You do have to be 18 years and older to participate, but the survey shouldn't take more than 20 minutes. It's about 30 questions long, and it deals with things like your background demographic, current residence, the effects of extreme heat and COVID-19, how you access or don't parks and green spaces, and then some other issues relating to policing and safety around parks and open spaces. So any questions you have about that, you can contact Sonal. I'm sure that the survey is now being sent to everybody right now, so you can fill it out now if you have the time. The second item is Cool It NYC. I think Janie Bavishi from the Mayor's Office of Resiliency, she touched on this topic. Cool It NYC is kind of a citywide initiative. They're installing more public features for cooling, things like spray showers, misters, installing spray caps on fire hydrants in the streets, on these cool streets. So New Yorkers have more access to kind of cooling features during heat waves. There's also a reusable water distribution program, water bottle distribution program that they have. And this is in addition to the installation of air conditioners that was talked about earlier. This right here is the map, where you can see it's an interactive map that shows you where the shady trees are, where the water features are, and also an index about high heat vulnerability. And the other item that we have here is just an announcement. The HEAP application, the Home Energy Assistance Program applications are extended to the 31st of August. And now residents in NYCHA may also apply, and also you may apply without a documentation of need. So it's more accessible to more people. And the final item to note here is that we invite all of you to be part of our Climate Justice Working Group membership. I'm a member of that. I think it's really exciting. You got to see some of the initiatives that we've been working on, participating in. So I encourage anybody who's interested in moving forward with this work to definitely participate. You can reach out to Sonal, who's heading that group. And apart from that, you can get all the resources related to extreme heat at the website. So that's www.weac.org/heat. And with that, thanks I just personally want to thank everybody for coming out and thank you for participating. It was really good.
Oh, Anthony, I just want to add two more quick items before turning it back over to Marquise to close out, close out our meeting. First of all, that the survey is also in Spanish as well. So when you click on that link, you can decide whether you want to take it in Spanish or in English. So please, we have both options available to you, and we hope everyone will take it. It'll be quick, and we want to try to get as many responses as we can by August. And then the last other quick comment is that these applications, the items that were waived from the HEAP applications, like living in NYCHA and not needing medical documentation, is due to a lot of WEAC's advocacy work with the state, with a lot of these energy-related issues that we heard from you all, that we learned about in our community meetings and in our research. And that's how we were able to do a lot of this advocacy work and played a big role in getting these eligibility requirements waived and added to. So you all can see the fruits of all of our labor. Like this really does work, and doing this work together really makes a big difference. So please join us and please take our survey. And thank you, Anthony, for giving all this information. And I'll turn it back to Marquise.
Yes.
Yes, hello. Good morning. I'm so sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to quickly, my name is Sylvia. Thank you very much to Charlie and Marquise for, a friendly reminder for making me to join in with WEAC, which I'm very proud of to be a part of. I wanted to just request as far as with the AC with the HEAP partnership. Where in between? What about the in-betweeners for those who are not seniors like me that have kids that we could apply for the AC? Is that still eligibility, or you have to be a senior?
No, you don't have to be a senior to be eligible for HEAP. There's a lot of different eligibility criteria. If you have children under 6, that also qualifies you. So there's a lot of different items, and I'll post the link again in the chat that has a list of all of the eligibility criteria. But you do not have to be a senior to apply.
Oh, to get the air conditioner?
Yes, that's for the Home Energy Assistance Program, which gives you
it's all under one. Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. I'll mute myself back. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. And yes, there was a ton of resources. It's almost overwhelming yet amazing to have so much information at our fingertips. We will be sure to make sure that we give you a recording of the video, as well as the links and resources I will put in the chat box. I just have a couple of additional updates that I want to share with you before we depart. Like everyone who has spoken before me, I do want to thank you all for coming out tonight. We still have 95 people who stood a full 2 hours with us, and that is just so amazing and so reflective of the WEAC community. Upcoming events that we have and resources that we have. Among the things that we're going to be sharing with you, we have a WEAC resource guide, so we will make sure that we get the link to you. If you haven't done so already, please, 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 census. August 13th is going to be the last day that census takers are going to be conducting interviews. And then the last thing on this slide I'm excited to share with you is that we have a Healthy Homes Public Housing Campaign kickoff meeting happening on July 21st. So if you are a public housing resident and you are sick and tired of putting in repair tickets, if you are sick and tired of having your health impacted by poor living conditions, then we want you to participate in our Healthy Homes kickoff meeting. Now, we have so many things that we shared again today. If you are not a member, please, please, please go to our website at www.weac.org and sign up and become a member. I'm going to kick it off to my colleague, Nicole, to let you know what we have coming for the next membership meetings. So Nicole, please take us out.
Hello. So my announcement is going to be in Spanish, and then I'll translate it into English. Bueno, buenas tardes. Tenemos una gran noticia hoy día para la próxima reunión. La próxima reunión en agosto va a ser bilingüe. Vamos a tener una opción en Zoom para que puedan escuchar en español. Entonces, si quieren, invitan a su amigo y nos vemos el próximo mes. And the translation of that is next month, our meeting will be bilingual in August. So we're going to have an option on Zoom so that you can select which language you would like to listen to. And that's it.
Next slide. We actually have a list of the upcoming membership meetings on the next slide. So in August, we will be focusing on housing. There was a moratorium on evictions for people who are struggling with paying their rent. That moratorium will be lifted. So what does that mean for our public housing residents who are still suffering financially? Not just public housing residents, all residents in the city. September 12th, we're going to be focusing on education from daycare all the way up to higher education. How are we going to be educating our folks? Will folks be returning back to school in September? October, we are going to be focusing on maternal mortality. And then finally in November, we will have our annual meeting. All of those meetings will be done bilingually, and I'm excited to make sure that we are now expanding our communications with more Northern Manhattan residents. So thank you all so much. And before I let you go, we just have one more announcement from our membership planning committee member, and I'm gonna give it up to Gwen. Gwen, are you with us?
I'm here. Thank you so much, Marquise. Everyone, as you are aware, there has been an increase in gun violence across America, here in Harlem, the Bronx, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I unfortunately just lost our young nephew to gun violence. So today, there's a kickoff rally at 145th Street and it's time of us to take a stand and do what we can do to stop the gun violence that's taking the lives of so many young people and our future generations. So again, the rally is on 145th Street, Lenox Avenue inside the park, and also with Marquise and Cecil and the rest of the group, we're going to keep them abreast of what we plan to do as artists to remember those who have been falling from gun violence. So we'll keep you abreast on that for an October exhibition. Thank you all for attending and listening, and I hope you will come out 145th Street and Lenox Avenue inside the park to stop the killing. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday.
Thank you all. Take good care. Stay cool.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy, stay safe and healthy.
Yeah, everyone have a good day.
Give WEAC a big clap.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. 5 o'clock to WEAC. Thank you.
Tony.
Thanks, Marquise.
Bye, Tony.
Cecil.
Hi, Gwen. Sorry, Gwen. Sorry.
Love you too.
Bye, Marquise.
Thank you. I have to enjoy your class, you guys. Thank you.
And Washington is always good to see you.
Great job. Thank you, Sonia.
Hey.
Tony.